The White House sets up its own news outlet, cuts to NPR and PBS, and the Department of Justice sends letters to medical journals. This week, thinking about all things on the Bald, Blind, and Buddies podcast.
Bald,
Blind,
and Buddies. How you doing, Timmy C? What do you have for me today? Good doc.
Yeah, doing good. It's a nice sunny spring day here in the upper Midwest.
It's May already. Do you believe that?
Yeah.
I mean, the best expression I ever heard about children was very, very long days and very, very short years. And it makes sense. The thing that drives me nuts, though, is my dad used to say, when you get older, time moves faster. And it doesn't make sense on its face, but it does. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, time is steady and consistent. It just seems to go by way faster now. That's all.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And we're going to try and book some guests. You want to tell us a little bit about some of the wackier ones we're looking into, Timmy?
We'll save it as a surprise, but we're gonna reach out and use some directories and find people who want to talk about interesting things that we're interested in.
Okay,
so
we
hope you are too, dear listener.
Awesome. And we have new lead-in music, correct?
We do. We're debuting season 2's lead-in music. If you guys like it, don't like it, let us know.
I think it sounds like a combination of I like the lead-in with us talking, saying Bald, Blind, and Buddies, but the rock part kind of sounds like a Bon Jovi album. It's like, where did you find it?
It's really grungy. I love it. I love
the
grungy sound. Yeah.
All
It's just so crunchy.
Okay. And we won't name the school, but your son is off to college next year. Congratulations.
Yeah.
To everyone.
Yeah, he's chosen, so that's good.
It's wonderful. Yeah. And the nice thing is most of the schools out there in the upper Midwest are only a couple hours any which way you want to slice it, so you can, go see them as need be. My thing was, I want my kids at least 2 to 3 hours away, short enough that we can do it if we have to, but long enough that you don't have to drop in. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's a bus too, so he may or may not have a vehicle. So.
I didn't get my car on campus. We weren't allowed to have it freshman year, if you remember, right?
Yeah.
We always bummed off at Andy, your roommate, because he lived in South Bend. But I had mine, I guess, second semester, sophomore year onward. But it's more hassle than it's worth. I mean, particularly universities now, they're so, in many ways, and that's what we're going to talk about today is academics and such. They're so cloistered. I mean, you don't even have to leave, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So, Timmy, let me give the trivia answer last week, and then I've got one for my struggling sports fans for this week. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. So last week I had asked, we said who was the longest pope. Last week we asked who was the shortest pope. And this was in the 16th century. Do you have any idea who it was, Tim?
Nope.
Pope Urban VII. He was only in office September 15th to September 27th. I think he died. He got pneumonia or something and died shortly after becoming pope. It's quite similar to William Henry Harrison. He got sick in between being elected and taking the horse to D.C. for the inauguration and died shortly thereafter. So William Henry Harrison was our shortest president, but the shortest pope was Pope Urban VII. That leads to this week's question. We'll get back into more sports related, obviously. But do you know of the cities in the United States? And again, I understand there's other sports than the 4 major sports of baseball, hockey, football, and basketball. Believe me, I do. We actually are going to a minor league baseball game next week. Love that kind of stuff. We have a friend who played professional lacrosse here in Philadelphia. That's exciting if you go to this. But all the cities that have the 4 major sports, and by that I mean hockey, baseball, basketball, and football. Do you know which city has the longest championship drought, Tim?
Ooh, man. The 4.
Yeah.
Does Cleveland have hockey?
They do not, but they already had the Cavaliers win in 2016. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they wouldn't even be in there.
Oh, yeah. So it's any championship.
Any championship, of the 4 major sports.
No.
Yeah. Well, answer next week. So, and how was everything this week, Timmy? What any news? Anything on the horizon strike you? Any?
Well, an update from your hero last week, Harvard.
Look, can we preface this again? I made them the hero of the week for them finally saying enough is enough, and they're going to stand up. And you had said my best bet is that compromise is likely, and that's I think what we're getting at here, right?
Yeah, we're seeing elements of compromise. So They renamed their DEI office to Campus and Community Life. And they also canceled their funding of affinity graduations, where people would voluntarily segregate by ethnicity or race to celebrate graduation.
Whoa. They still had something like that in
Yes,
2024,
no,
2025?
this has been a thing, John. So people would have their own safe space to celebrate graduation with their particular group.
So if you're African American, you can go with the other African American students, Asian students, and so forth. Just go down the line. Is that what you're telling me?
So if you're African American, you could go to, of course, the main graduation, but there would also be a separate African American.
Isn't that what we fought the Civil War over?
Or at least,
God, what is wrong with these people?
yeah, Plessy versus Ferguson was bad law, right? We knew that. Brown versus the Board of Ed, and so they're pulling back on that and not funding those.
I think that's great. I will bravo to the Trump administration if that's the end result, because I mean, I don't mean to reduce it down to its simplest form, but John Roberts, when they had that case about pre-authorization, the Voting Rights Act and so forth, and the Supreme Court justice basically said the easiest way to end racial discrimination is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. That's
right.
The same thing, is it not?
Yeah, and that's the whole premise that Coleman Hughes comes out with, The End of Race Politics, in his wonderful book. So yes, exactly. So I think those are steps forward that Harvard is doing. You could also say Harvard is beginning to compromise, however you want to call it. It's an update on your hero from last week.
But that seems to be, again, I think that's a good outcome as a consequence of this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But even terribly bad ideas and actions can have good outcomes, right?
That's true. Well, there is an argument. I tend to believe this as it relates to getting legislation passed. There is an old joke that the two things you never want to watch being made are sausages or hot dogs and laws, because if you do, you'll never look at it the same. It's a messy process. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I tend to believe in getting legislation passed. It tends to, the ends usually justify the means. How you get there from point A to point B to me is irrelevant. What is the net effect? So, Nancy Pelosi basically held the Democrats' feet to the fire and said, if you do not pass Obamacare, I'm going to destroy your career. And they got through.
Yeah.
So, but again, there's few and far instances of this behavior being okay, but I'm okay with Harvard backing down on that. I don't find that to be acceptable in any way, shape, or form, much less in 2024. You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
So I noticed a couple items in the news this week, John.
Okay.
And I'll juxtapose these first two because I think they're relevant. So the White House has come up with the White House Wire, which looks like it was sort of copied after the Drudge Report, which is a website hosted on White House servers that will feature Trump-friendly news. Did you catch that?
No. As you know, since November, I have, to say I have lost hope. It's better for my mental health. And I have to tell you, Jimmy said this to me the other day. He goes, Bolin, I kind of do the same thing, and I hate to admit it, but my life really hasn't changed much since Trump became president. And I have to admit that as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's appalling, his behavior. I mean, he's all but running a private crypto business out of the White House. He's doing X, Y, and Z. And it's just, it's appalling. So, but nonetheless, I'm fine. So,
yeah.
I just hate that mentality that if it's okay for me, who cares about everybody else? That's all.
Right. Well, here's the flip side of that one, though, John, is he's also simultaneously signed an executive order to try to cut funding for PBS and NPR. So it would be one thing to say the government will get out of the news business, right? We'll save your taxpayer dollars. You can find news where you like. It's the fourth pillar. It should be separate from government. It's another to say we're going to cut one branch of government-funded news and start another, right?
Yeah. There is an element of me. Yeah. I don't know necessarily if the government should be in the business of funding these things, but then I also look at it and say, look, I would much rather have public financing of campaigns writ large. I think public financing of certain things is the answer to a lot of these issues. But, that kind of thing is nuts. And you wanted to talk about sort of them putting pressure on the medical establishment. Did you not?
Yeah, that was my lead in.
Okay.
So the Department of Justice sent a letter to at least 5 medical journals, Chest, Obstetrics and Gynecology, and the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the premier medical journal.
The preeminent medical journal, right.
In this country.
Right.
So, and it had a list of 5 questions. Can I just read these off?
Please.
How do you assess your responsibilities to protect the public from misinformation? How do you clearly articulate to the public when you have certain viewpoints that are influenced by your ongoing relationships with supporters, funders, advertisers, and others? Do you accept articles and advertising from competing viewpoints? Let me just hit those. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Here's how you protect your responsibility versus misinformation. You do good hypothesis-driven science and follow where the data leads, right? That's how you answer that, right? There's no... Science is an agreement to a set of procedures, right, and methods. And if you do that, then your chances of misinformation are low. And your ability to correct yourself, you would correct yourself if you wound up going down a wrong path. So like that, to me, that implies a lack of understanding of how science works, right? Do you accept articles or ideas from competing viewpoints? If they're not scientific, then no, right? The viewpoint you accept articles from is science. So I don't, like, that doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense either. And then they say, how do you assess the role of government organizations in funding research, NIH, etc.? And I do find this interesting. So when people publish, they have to say where they get their money, especially if they, like when I give a talk, I say, I work for this company.
Well, ethically, you should have to, oftentimes people will say, full disclosure, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, but we're criticizing Amazon, right? Or, that kind of thing.
But they don't usually say, I am fully dependent on the government's largesse. Right. Like, and I think that is a mistake, that we should acknowledge that, these folks are in the scientific, industrial, federal complex. And I think it's fair to acknowledge that, but I don't think, that's not worth the DOJ getting into.
Right. So what would be your solution here? I think this is just part and parcel of the larger issue, which is Trump sort of has a perceived, or at least there's something about the psyche of the American polity right now that everyone is aggrieved. And he is acting out sort of this fetish fantasy, if you will, of getting revenge on people or institutions that he feels, or that the right feels, they're being wrong somehow. Academia criticizes him. It must be because academia is liberal. I'm not saying two things can't be true at the same time. I don't know why he's going after the New England Journal of Medicine, right?
Well, so in 2020, there were papers in the New England Journal and the Lancet, which were subsequently retracted, which showed evidence of ideological capture, right? This was in the midst of COVID. And the one in the Lancet is the most telling because it was a study that used a large data set, which has a lot of questions about it now, that said hydroxychloroquine was not safe.
Right.
And it turns out if you can declare hydroxychloroquine not safe, that clears the field for Fauci and Paxlovid and other interventions to be called emergency use authorizations.
See, now you're getting into the weeds with this. This is the stuff you would know. I would have no clue.
Yeah. So there are, so if journals follow the science, right, which, is not a given, right, then things will work okay. But the challenge is there actually are ideologically captured areas within science, especially the social or quote unquote softer sciences, where it's just captured, right? And I don't think this, dear colleague DOJ letter will shake that up, because if people actually believe this stuff, the answer is to ideological capture is not conquest from another ideology. It's people being grown-ups and backing off.
Well, this is the same thing we just discussed with Harvard, is it not? Segregation in any form is incorrect. Why is it acceptable to segregate students because they choose to be segregated? That's not acceptable. I'm going to segregate based on race or gender or what have you. I find that to be unacceptable. However, I actually, far be it from me to ever defend the Trump administration, but I don't know if this is just sort of the opening salvo in his war to get little changes. I don't think that they're wholesale going to cut off funding for A, Harvard University, or B, for the New England Journal of Medicine or the Lancet or these kinds of things. So why do you suppose they're doing it? Is it just because of what happened with COVID? They're getting revenge, so to speak?
Well, I think it's their notion that they can substitute their ideology for the other one, right? A show of force, and you can put your ideology in place. And to me, it demonstrates a lack of confidence in your own ideology, because I would say, I trust rational people following science to end up in the same place, right? That's why we have this system. So I don't think he has that fundamental trust in a process or a method.
Okay. You know, he's not somebody that I find to be interesting, fascinating, somebody that needs to be studied. Say what you want about Richard Nixon, but he was enormously complicated and twisted all in knots and these types of things. Same with Bill Clinton. I find these people worthy of study, whether you agree with their politics or otherwise. He, to me, personifies just spoiled rich kid who cheated his way through life. I mean, Fareed Zakaria said it. Trump's brand is bullshit, and quite literally bullshit, meaning that's what he peddles in, just complete and total nonsense. And, you know, he rose it all the way to the White House. He has undeniable talent. You cannot get where you're at or his position in life, even if you start from, you know, third base, without some level of talent. That being said, however, I think anything that seems to question his authenticity, his success, his power, he immediately has to destroy them. So I'm sure that this is probably him reflexively reacting to COVID and blaming the New England Journal of Medicine for hydrochloroquine. How do you pronounce it, Timmy?
Hydroxychloroquine. Yeah.
Hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, you sent me an article that I'd like to discuss, which is in line with that as well, which is, you know, the death of academic freedom, basically. And I think this is part and parcel of the challenge of the Trump administration, which is, you know, it's always said that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. But I think what they're doing is basically saying, you guys are wrong, fill in the blank, whether it's Harvard, the New England Journal of Medicine, and otherwise, and saying, we're going to tell you what the truth is, right?
Yes.
You know, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And so substituting one for another just because it's on the opposite end of the spectrum is not acceptable to me. And this was one of the things that you sent me, this article called The Broken Promise of Academic Freedom, and how ideology eroded trust and what it will take to rebuild it. And this fellow, Sasha Rosenberg, puts a tremendous amount of blame on the humanities in universities. And he, you know, they talk about the Humboldt model, which is basically, you know, the emerging intellectual class and so forth. And he says the Humboldtian ideal envisioned the university as a space free from political and social pressures, dedicated solely to dispassionate, objective scholarship. But as massive public funding began to flow into universities to support both research and teaching, one of the key pillars of that independence, financial detachment from the state, began to erode. As the old saying goes, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So there is an element in me that maybe this isn't the worst thing that we're getting the government out of funding television, right? Am I wrong there, Tim?
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, though, thinking about this academic independence. So I did also come across an article, and I mentioned this before, Johanna Olson Kennedy, who did this federally funded large study to see if giving puberty blockers to children improved their mental health. It didn't in her study, but she sat on the results for over 9 years, still has not published them because she was worried that the results would be used for a political outcome.
Huh.
Right. So and a similar thing happened in the UK. So basically what you have is, you know, we paid for that research, right? And we didn't ask her to censor it. If you trust science and a process, right, you should disclose your results. So this is an example of the ideological environment, you know, impacting what does show up in journals. So it circles back to this notion of academic freedom and the DOJ letter, but it doesn't really answer, you know, I don't think the DOJ letter is an answer.
Right. But again, it's tough. And one of the things that I lament is a lot of the base level sort of pillars, if you will, of things that I think have long made the United States great are being, you know, even if it's cosmetically, sort of attacked. So let's go down the list. We're welcoming to immigrants. No, we all, but now that's not to say, and then again, I want to stress two things can be true at the same time. Illegal immigration is a problem that needs to be addressed. It has been passed from, you know, one administration to the next, Republican and Democrat, and back again, because nobody seems willing to touch that political hot potato. However, one of the things I call out, and I said this to you one time, it is a statistical fact that of the Fortune 500 companies, nearly 300 of them, or approaching 60%, were started either by immigrants or first-generation children of immigrants. That's number one. Secondarily, the rule of law. The president, in an interview yesterday or today, I believe it was, with NBC News, they asked him point blank, do you believe that you have a duty? It's in the oath of the presidency to uphold the Constitution. And his answer, I don't know. That's number two. And the fact that Republicans are allowing this is just appalling to me. This seems to be a hill to die on. The third example is basically, corruption. There is an element of me that recognizes that, Kennedy was corrupt and that, Joseph Kennedy got his money from bootlegging and this and that. And, one of my favorite lines is from Jerry Tarkanian, the former head basketball coach at the University of Las Vegas and University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he said, it's important to remember there are no virgins at big time college athletics. So what I'm saying is, if you go into that level of political office, corruption is going to be around you. That being said, there is an element of me that sort of celebrates that Trump is just as brazen as he is. He's quite literally running a private enterprise out of the White House. He's changing White House, websites to forward his agenda. I mean, it's appalling, these things that, I used to think these were not things that could be assaulted. He's proven me wrong in 100 days. So,
well, and I think we thought we were trying to build, the founders were trying to build a constitution with enough safeguards that it wouldn't need, great men, right? But clearly something has eroded over that.
It was either James Madison or Benjamin Franklin. I have to look it up. But if men were angels, government wouldn't be necessary, right?
Yeah.
And this fellow who I just talked about is talking about this as well at the academic level. And he's saying the problem doesn't just stop with the humanities. Even the sciences, once thought immune to ideological pressure, have started to buckle. Science ideally is grounded in empirical reality. And this is my favorite line here. Electrons don't care about your feelings. Galaxies aren't interested in your hashtags. Nature imposes discipline, whether we like it or not. But what he's saying is even now, the reluctance of people to have serious debate. And we saw this point blank during COVID-19. Alternative viewpoints were suppressed. People were refuted. Gender medicine, dissent was treated not merely as wrong, but as evil. Scientific journals openly signaled their willingness to filter research through political frameworks, placing ideological alignment above empirical findings. That to me is unacceptable. I'm not saying Trump is only responsible for this, but he is certainly adding gasoline to the fire. Is he not, Tim?
Yeah, I think so too. And like I say, I think the answer is people backing off, trusting the process and acting like grown-ups and letting the facts fall where they may, in well-designed, as unbiased as possible science, right? That's what we need to do.
What triggered this for you? Because this was something you really wanted to talk about this week, sort of the broad stroke. How would we categorize this discussion? Sort of political pressure and academic freedom, basically?
Even beyond that, I would say political pressure it's essentially a free press, right? A free medical press issue that journals should be able to not be interfered with by the government in what they put out, right? It's essentially a First Amendment for medicine issue, I would say.
Right, but that's also part and parcel of media writ large for me, which is the profit motive is going to exist, but Fareed Zakaria, who I've met personally, said one time, it's a guaranteed number one bestseller for the year of 52 weeks that we put out. We put out 52 magazines. He was managing editor of Newsweek. And he said, if we put Princess Di on the cover, that's going to be our bestseller. That woman has been deceased, God rest her soul, for nearly 30 years. But to me, that's not news. You know what I'm saying? So the profit motive can cut both ways, which is, if the government's involved, he who pays the piper calls the tune, right? So, I mean, I see this, I lament this, but by the same token, how are you going to get these guys to publish, to do research if you're not paying them, right? I don't know, Tim. I don't know what the answer is. You tell me.
Well, the example I gave, right, it was a federally funded study and the author didn't publish, right? So they were given the money and the government and we deserve the results of that, right? And the individual chose not to publish. So that's an example of ideological capture, right? And we're already paying the piper, but we're not getting the tune.
Right. The research was done. We just didn't get to see it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And still haven't.
Do you think it's become exacerbated under the Trump administration? Because
I think so.
There is probably a lament that could, be leveled at the Biden administration during COVID. I mean, studies have indicated, now, again, this is very broad strokes, it's not bringing into all the data and so forth, but that masks didn't work unless there were M19s, right? Mm-hmm. There was no purpose in wearing masks. Children should be in school. all of these things. And as this fellow points out in this article about academic freedom, it's when science becomes subject to political pressure, that's bad, right? Electrons aren't supposed to care about your feelings. They just are. So.
Right. I mean, we look at Galileo and Darwin as heroes, right? Because
Right.
they face this in their own way, but we can't see it in our own time is the interesting thing.
What would you suggest we do? How do you fix it?
It's a good question. I think there's a new, it's called the Journal for Unpopular Results, where people can publish under a pseudonym. That's interesting. There's, it's a lot easier to get information out these days. People have their Substacks. So it may be like the mainstream press. People are bypassing it to get information out, and we may just.
But doesn't that further silo us? Meaning, if there isn't some universal record of truth, and I'm not saying that the New York Times or Wall Street Journal is the go-to, but if there's not agreed upon factual analysis of everyday events, having someone on who says the Earth is flat, that's an opinion you're allowed to have. Your opinion's wrong. But
right.
The way in which they're going to make money and get clicks and drive revenue is by having that person on, because they're so outlandish. I mean, look at all the headline coverage this week about this 24-year-old girlfriend of Bill Belichick. First of all, who cares, right? She's 24 years old. He's 73 years old.
Yeah.
And she's dictating the terms, blah, blah, blah. It's, in its essence, all about clicks, money revenue, money generating revenue, and so forth. But again, that's where I lose my mind. And this fellow signs off this article and he says, look, if you ask me, academic freedom is still worth defending, but only if we remember what it was for. It wasn't meant to protect ideology. It was meant to protect inquiry. What society grants, society can also revoke. If academic freedom is to endure, we must remember it's not a sacred right. It's a promise we keep.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, you were fired up about this. Is there something in your experience that really sort of I'm always, you're the psychiatrist. Why am I digging in, having you lie down on the couch and say, tell me why? What happened with your mom? Blah, blah. What happened with your dad when you were 17? What triggered this? Because you were fired up about this week.
Yeah, well, I'll give this is a very minor example, just from my own personal experience. So I'm a reviewer for a particular journal. In an article I was reviewing, I deal with things like substance use, right?
Mm-hmm.
The authors talked about self-medication with substances. And that's sort of a popular notion, but scientifically, it's not particularly well established that, anxious people drink because they're anxious. And then, so.
Wait a minute, explain that again, because alcohol is, Homer Simpson says it, alcohol, the cause of and solution to all the problems in the world.
Yeah.
What was there's no evidence on what? I'm sorry, I wasn't.
Well, it's not great evidence. So there's this notion, the evidence supporting the idea that people use substances to self-medicate psychological disorders.
Really?
Yeah. The evidence isn't.
It seems so obvious to me.
Well, it does seem obvious.
Huh?
But so what I said is, I think in this introduction to your paper, you should use the word self-medication hypothesis.
Okay. Right.
Suggesting that it wasn't fully established and tested in a known fact, right? And I got like significant pushback. They're like, no, this is why. And they said, people believe this is basically why they said they pushed back. And I was like, fine.
Yeah, people believe the Earth was flat. They were wrong.
Yeah. So I was like, fine, whatever. But that's my example of like ideological capture. And some letter to the journal isn't going to fix that, right? It's individuals being able to take a step back and say, do I really know what I know, and why do I? Right. And so like that's just my very minor bump into ideology at journals, but it's out there because people are out there.
All right, let me ask you a question. Where's the line in the sand for you? What I mean by that is you're all about, and have always been this way, about encouraging academic freedom. Let's share opinions, get it out there, and let the best ones win, right?
Yep.
It becomes problematic, and as you know, oftentimes is the devil's in the details. Where do you draw the line? So one of the examples that they used in this Supreme Court case just this week about this St. Isidore school in Oklahoma is, that's fine if they let the Catholics in. But when a Muslim school applies, are they going to get the same treatment to be a charter school? Because on its face, the answer should be obvious. Yes, they should. But the reality is otherwise, right? So where do you draw the line on people saying outlandish things? One of the theories that I happen to agree with is everybody's opinion should be heard. The only people you should not listen to are people who deny the Holocaust. There's actually a famous modern theorist, his name escapes me, who's basically said, look, put as much information out there. Guys who deny the Holocaust, don't listen to them. That's pretty much his line, so to speak. Where's your line, Tim?
Well, so I would essentially listen to everybody and quickly discard things, right? So I don't, I think we should have the ability to sift information and then go from there. So you want to say something, idiotic, like deny the Holocaust, that's fine. I'm definitely not going to promote you. I'm not going to agree with you. I'm going to think you're an idiot, but I think you have the right to say it.
But is this one of those things, this hypothesis you're saying, is this one of these things that you really think is that big of a deal?
No, I mean, it's not a huge deal. I just said, when you resubmit the paper, I don't want to review it because you're, because you're not thinking scientifically as far as I understand it. Right. And, the paper got published. It's all fine. It just, it's my example of how ideology, trumps science sometimes.
Huh. Okay. Fair enough. Well, I won't ruin it, but I'll tell you after. We just got confirmation of a guest, and I'll tell you about it after this podcast. We'll see when we can schedule him. So it is another he. Trying to get some ladies.
Not Lady Gaga?
Invites. What's that?
Not Lady Gaga, huh?
No. Did you see Jimmy's text message?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he sent us a text message saying, forget Lady Gaga. You should get somebody from the WNBA. We said, all right, let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and Timmy, you have a hero. I always like to end with hero as opposed to a whack job, but I have a whack job. And as a standing rule, the people that I loathe the most, as you know, Timmy, are the people that know better, meaning brilliant people. The Ted Cruzes, the Josh Hawleys, the Mike Lees, all of whom were Supreme Court clerks, all these sorts of things, right? Sometimes I feel sorry for people that don't know better. And like, for instance, Sarah Palin. I think she was a fabulous story. I think she was interesting, the first woman nominee on the Republican side of the ticket and so forth. But I don't think there was much there between her ears. I feel the same way about Trump. I don't know. I know Trump is a fabulist. And as I said, his entire brand is bullshit. And that's just basically what he is. He is a carnival barker. But he is my whack job of the week this week. Do you know why, Tim?
Is it the Pope thing?
Yes, it's the Pope thing. That little thing. He had an AI-generated picture of himself nominating himself to be the Pope. This man is the least godly human being that has probably ever walked the earth. How evangelicals love him so much is beyond me. But again, I feel about organized religion writ large. I'll just leave it at that. But what kind of an egomaniac, just almost an asshole, would do something like that? Trump. He's my whack job this week, Tim.
I agree on this one. It's so juvenile.
It's tasteless. The idea that he does things that are beyond the pale of the dignity of the Oval Office, that went bye-bye a long time ago. The man insults military families, and I'm waiting for him to start using improper words, and I won't say them, but you know what I'm talking about. So
yeah. Well, I mean, in hundreds of millions of Catholics, good job.
And he carried the Catholic vote.
Yeah,
I don't understand it. So, but again, somebody said to me yesterday, they said, are you as certain of this as you were with Trump losing in November? I said, as you know, I don't make predictions anymore. I'm predicting. I'm not going to predict. I don't know anything. So what do you have for your hero, Timmy?
Well, John, my hero comes from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, as you might imagine.
Wow. Timmy, I got to sit down. I got to get my ventilator. Do you have the paddles ready in case I have a heart attack?
Oh, yeah. So, it's an open secret that University Health Services, which delivers student health at UW, Madison is struggling. They under current leadership, they dropped from number 1 in the Princeton Review rankings to 14th. The UW cripples it with administrative bloat and ineffective leadership. And then the university underfunds it, and then they actually go to the students to ask for more money for student health. It's an amazing system.
Well, you're sending your son to college, Jimmy, I mean, they're putting up a new building every 5 days. Notre Dame just sent out a fundraiser. I give to them every month. They just sent out another one. I was like, oh, good God.
So the UW is putting up a $400 million engineering building, but still scraping up money for mental health services. So there's a senior, her name is Shelby Olson, she was paying attention, and she said, you know what? Mental health services on campus are lacking, especially for those who are graduating and transitioning out. So she came up with a fundraising system, and they have set aside and given extra money to university health services on campus to support graduating seniors. And they actually have enough money to keep it going for the next 3 years. So,
Wow.
so she saw what was going on, and did what she could to help. And I give her credit for doing that. So she's my hero of the week, Shelby. Congrats.
That's wonderful. How much money did they end up raising? Do you have a ballpark?
Actually, yeah, I didn't see the number. I got it linked in the article so people can.
Was it a couple 100,000 or was it a couple million?
No, it's not. I don't think it's in the millions.
Oh,
so.
man. That's still impressive, though, right?
Yeah. It's
And
really nice.
why are they struggling? And they were number one. Obviously, they're struggling now since you left. I mean, it's just not the same.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a big part of it.
Duh.
Yeah.
So, right.
It's like, when you lose Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, your franchise is going to take a step back.
That's good stuff right there, Timmy.
Yeah.
Why are they struggling? Do you have a theory?
A lot of yes, I do.
Please don't blame it on California liberals. Please, I'm begging you, just for me. What as an objective science-based analysis, what would you say is the reason that the University of Wisconsin in Madison is struggling?
Well, it's really interesting, John. It has a lot of parallels to Washington. There's leadership who confuses ignorance with virtue and authoritarianism for strength.
Fair.
That's what I would say.
But just ideologically on the other side, right? They're a
Yeah,
liberal there,
yeah, exactly.
and right now we've got a conservative doing it, or he's not even conservative; he's a Republican.
Yeah,
in Washington.
For the longest time, John, they did not think there was such a thing as left-wing authoritarianism. This is because the
it's
social
called TikTok
psychology
and all these social media will publicly shame someone to the point where they, drop out of school and all these crazy things. And I will be the first person to tell you, liberals are the ones that killed comedy. Lighten up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, well, Timmy, it's always good to connect with you, pal. And you have a wonderful week. And I'll fill you in later about our upcoming guest. But what was I going to say? Oh, I remember now. I happened to have on the 30 for 30 about the Notre Dame 1988 game against Miami, the Catholics versus convicts. And do you know who was mentioned in there? Father Joe Carey.
Really?
Yep. The guys who made that shirt initially were all Dillon guys. And they were walking through the hall. I think they lived in our hall. So, cool. I think they lived in 116 or 115 and 117 kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of cool. But listen, have a great week. Say hello to everybody out there. And any ideas people have, feel free, send them in. And this is John Bullen signing off saying, hey, misbehave, drive fast, take chances.
And this is Tim saying, if everybody likes what you're doing, you're probably not doing anything worthwhile. Take care out there.